The baseball season is over. Welcome into Husker Max today. I'm Kaleb Henry. That is Nick Handley. Huskers go down to Chapel Hill and go 1-2 in that regional. Pair of losses to the Sooners. They do get a win over Holy Cross. End the year 33-29, which sounds significant for a team that went months without being above 500 and then finished really strong over the last couple of weeks to get there. But first, Nick, on the lack of sleep that you are, let's talk about Chapel Hill. 2 games against Oklahoma. They've got a lot of offense. They if things get going their way, they can take a lot of advantage of that. Obviously, we saw what that looked like on Sunday with bases loaded, no outs in the first, and in Nebraska kind of kicking the ball around a little bit. A number of those didn't even leave the infield. It was just kind of a case of the yips for everybody from the get-go, and Sooners took advantage of that. But Nebraska had a nice bounce back in their second game after an opening day loss to Oklahoma. Just your reaction to this weekend and this team that shouldn't have been playing in a regional getting there, and then not going 0-2 barbecue, but they did grab one win while they were there, so it wasn't for nothing.
Yeah, and I think that win was very, very indicative of the type of team. I think that 9 innings was, again, sort of a microcosm of this team's resilience. But I'll go back to Friday, and I think when you're looking at these types of games, even though it wasn't Oklahoma's bona fide ace, it was still a guy with an electric arm that's going to throw it anywhere between 95 and 98 miles an hour. And the movement on that fastball as well. You know, you'd have some two-seam action where you're getting some run on that fastball. And I always felt, we talked about it in the pregame, that there's going to be that first and second inning where, especially a guy like Malachi Witherspoon, who had not thrown in the SEC tournament, where there was a little bit longer layoff than some of the arms you were going to see, there might be a little bit more of a settle-in period that while he's doing so, you had to take advantage and try to strike that first blow on him and see if you can maybe get him out of there, or he continues to make mistakes and you hammer down on those. So you go back to that bases loaded situation Nebraska had, albeit with 2 outs, but still runners on base and putting some pressure on. What Nebraska had done, and one of the reasons they got to that regional, what they have done really in the last, I'd say 4 to 5 months, is that situation wouldn't elude them, where they would come up empty, where they would, in this case, it was Dylan Carey just did not get good contact on the pitch that he put in play. But for the most part, it's been a Nebraska team that has come up with that clutch gene, and they've been able to put that type of pressure on a team early on. And I thought when you saw Malachi Witherspoon get out of that jam, I think he felt like he had somewhat of a new lease on life. And I think that at that point, with arms like that, if they can breathe that sigh of relief, they get locked in. They re-engage into that game and into that performance. And I thought he was very good. He was tough to track. His slider was really effective on top of a very electric fastball. So Nebraska had their work cut out for them, no question, offensively. But I thought for that game, it took on kind of a very weird moment in the second inning when you had their catcher at the time, Scott Mudler, who ended up dislocating his shoulder sliding back to first base. And we didn't know at the time what was going on. And I didn't know at the time the rule of the 10 minutes that you have to allow a player to come back in the game, which I think
nobody knew the rule.
and I think it was a disservice for Jackson Brockett. And I would have said the same thing if Nebraska was afforded that opportunity and Malachi Witherspoon, like that's a disservice to the pitcher, because that is a lengthy delay and it's early. So you've just gotten hot. Mm-hmm. You've got settled into your first inning. And now all of a sudden this lengthy delay that you're allowing a player to come back into the game at some point. Like, look, you feel bad for the guy. There's no question. But at some point, you got to be able to say, all right, we can't allow the other team, especially the pitcher, to sit cold for a while you guys are trying to do what you need to do to get this guy back in the game. I just don't like that rule. And again, it worked against Nebraska, so I'm going to speak out against it. But I didn't know that was a 10-minute rule. That's a long time. I think that thing could be 5 minutes, no more than that. But as we found out, they were popping that shoulder back into place. Nebraska was aware of it, and Nebraska, quite honestly, wanted to see if he would dive back into first because of how sore that shoulder was. So they did pick off a couple of times. That drew the booing from a lot, not only the Oklahoma fans, but also from a lot of people in that dugout. They were pretty fired up. And then Drew Dickerson hits a 2-run homer. Then the emotion of that game really took another level. But Oklahoma, I think, really they fed off of that. They were able to do enough. Nebraska, a little bit of a late surge there, but just too little too late in that game. I love the bounce back. We were really, I'll be honest, I was very concerned in that Holy Cross game because I would say, and this would be, I think, generous, that those players even got 5 hours of sleep before getting to the hotel. You're eating on the bus. You're trying to shut it down by the time you get to your hotel room. And you know how kids are that age. It's not like they're going to go into their room, they're going to turn the lights off, and they're just going to go to bed right away. I mean, they're probably still thinking about the things that they didn't do, or they're being kids, you know. They're not just going to turn it off like that. You have a quick turnaround. You're showing up to breakfast in your uniform, and then you're getting right back on a bus and you're trying to save your season. And I just thought that even though that game was scoreless up until the 5th, Holy Cross gets the solo home run from Scanlon, and all of a sudden you're thinking, uh-oh, this is not looking good. But Caden Brumball answers right back. Devin Nunez was outstanding. Hogan Eligzo had a great game as well. And you had another fantastic performance. Maybe not the same type of performance that Ty Horn had against UCLA from a stuff standpoint, but he just competed out there. He got outs. He was thrown into some weak contact. I thought what Ty Horn did was continuing to show that process of development, that maturation, both physically and mentally, of what he's been able to bring for Nebraska, to where you circle number 20 right there on the roster and say, gosh, this kid is going to be fun to watch going forward, because I thought you saw a major jump from a kid who's got natural ability, a guy who's got a heavy fastball, who's got good off speed, good breaking stuff, but being able to put it all together, limit the pitch count, and being able to pitch through outings when you don't necessarily have your best stuff, or maybe you're getting squeezed in the strike zone as well, and being able to respond positively and not letting that get to you. I thought Ty Horn was such a bright spot. That was such a positive moment for him, and Nebraska just really gritting that thing out to win and to keep the season alive. Then you're thinking, okay, now you go home, you go back to the hotel, you get some rest, let North Carolina and Oklahoma duke it out. Hopefully that game will go late. And they did get an hour and a half delay, which was nice. You're thinking, okay, Nebraska's a little bit more rested and everything. But as those elimination games go, it's the team that, in my opinion, that can make something happen early. And you just have a defensive half inning for Nebraska that went completely sideways, completely uncharacteristic for them. And before you know it, Oklahoma's out to the 3-0 lead. And then again, that snowball, that dirty snowball, just continued to roll down the hill.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when that happens, but like it's almost contagious. It's like, okay, the ball bounces wrong for one guy here, then it's gonna bounce wrong for the others. You saw it you see it in almost every game. At some point, if you're watching enough, if you go back to the softball, the first game of their super regional against Tennessee could not hold on to the ball. And Nebraska took advantage of that. Nebraska started out that series 1-0. It happens, and you see it if you watch enough baseball, enough softball. Real quick on that injury timeout, I was talking with some folks who are big soccer fans, and I told them, I go, maybe it's the sport, maybe it's the mentality, because it's a little bit different, and also maybe not enough people know the rule. I'm surprised. Think about when UCLA was getting upset about how quick the pitching was going late in the game in that championship for the Big Ten title. I don't understand why, if you get someone on base, someone dive back into that base and go, yeah, I'm hurt. And you burn 5-8 minutes of, we're working him out, we're fixing his shoulder.
It's kind of like the faking an injury in football that they rid it of.
If you are allotted that much time,
right,
and there is a pitcher who is dealing, and you're having trouble with his pace of process on the mound, and you're trying to speed up the game. That's the reason there's a pitch clock. That's a reason that you have to be in the box by a certain time. There's a reason that all of those things are there. But some team is going to take advantage of that in a nefarious way, not a, they're popping back in a shoulder.
Yeah, which
Obviously,
they were, and you could see his throw, and I think it was Caden Brumball who stole a base. The throw to second was the fact that he even got it there was impressive.
yes.
That kid was clearly playing through some pain, which I tip the cap. But yeah, to your point,
But yeah, there's
I hear you.
That one, it was legitimate. Was it still a long time? Was it still like, this isn't great for Nebraska? This feels like it's unfair to what Brockett is doing on the mound. Yes. But someone is going to do it in a way that they just go, no, we need a breather here. This is basically a timeout for our team, that you can burn 5 minutes and then the pitcher's just standing there like, all right, I guess we'll go sometime. And then even if they bounce back from that, maybe you've broken up their rhythm a little bit. They're not dealing at that pace, and your hitters now have a little bit more of a chance than they did. I'm surprised that doesn't happen more. As it stands, though, neither here nor there. Nebraska's season is done. That wasn't the play that did it. Just an overall thought about baseball and the game and the rule itself. I wonder if eventually that'll get knocked down to maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 6 minutes. It was because it was about 6 minutes. I put the timer on between pitches, or at least between him diving back in and then getting to throw that next pitch. So Nebraska's season 33-29, and it's phenomenal to look at this season as a whole in all of its ups and its downs. Those ups including wins over Vanderbilt, obviously what Nebraska was able to do through the Big Ten tournament with Oregon and UCLA, who were regional hosts, winning the series against Oregon State, winning at Kansas, like those types of things, splitting with K-State. But then the other side of it, to where yes, they finished higher up in the league, but you dropped a series to Iowa. You don't want to do that. You lost the overall series with Omaha and Creighton over the course of the regular season. You went and you got swept in a Big Ten series at UCLA. You weren't able to take every game from what was it, like Pepperdine?
They did take two against Pepperdine.
Yeah, they got both of those. But yeah, there was a lot more runs than maybe they wanted in those Pepperdine games. The highs were absolutely high, where it's like, this team can be a top 25 team. But then when you the sand settled on a lot of other portions of the season, you're like, yeah, it makes sense that they're hovering around 500.
Yeah, and I think it has layers to it. I think there are a lot of things to unpack that I'm still kind of doing with this season, because I can't remember if it was yesterday or right after the game against Oklahoma, that end of the season, that somebody had asked me, well, do you consider the season a success? And I said 100% it is. When you're holding up any type of hardware,
you got a trophy in the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a success. And given where the season was headed after March, you're wondering if they're going to get back to Omaha. So the ability for this team to figure out, okay, this is the team that we have to play with right now. We don't have a Mason McConaughey right now. We don't know when Tucker Timmerman's going to be back. So this is the team that we have to play with right now. Let's start building off of that. Let's start getting our rotation for the weekend set without having our elite arm and Mason McConaughey, and try to utilize other guys. All right, let's try to set up our bullpen and see how that's going to look. You had a couple of guys that went down with illness too. The Max Butenbach illness. The guy was coming in with an 11-game hitting streak and was just absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. And then all of a sudden you get in, we find out Saturday morning that Max is not going to be not only available that day, but he's not going to be available for the rest of the weekend. Then we found out that that's almost a month-long illness for a kid who was really surging at the time. Then Robbie Bolin goes out with the hamstring in the Big Ten championship, so he's unavailable. Joshua Overbeek fractures an ankle, just having a tire blown on rounding second in that Oregon game. So injuries happen, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but they happen in various times of the year where I felt like Nebraska was just trying to keep their head above water. But I do think that for the expectations of this team going into the season, those expectations were because you assumed you would have a healthy Mason McConaughey and a bona fide number one. And what that does for what you want to do on a Sunday, whether you want to be able to have depth like a guy and between Jackson Brockett and Will Walsh. You feel like what Ty Horne, especially what he showed as of late, that was a true Saturday guy. But it changes so much what you want to do out of your bullpen as well. And does Drew Christo have as many appearances if Mason McConaughey is available as Drew Christo? Even that much more lights out, which he pretty much was the entire year. But you put a lot of work on him because he'd have to come in some early Friday games and then maybe be asked to come back in on a Sunday or even in a Saturday. So there's that part of it. And I think that's where a lot of the expectations started. But then you also look at a team that returned a lot of their offensive slug from a year ago, with the exception of a Josh Caron. And Josh Caron was a huge one to lose, but you had to make up for that production in multiple ways. But then it was almost like a team-wide slump in March, which I got to be honest, I've never seen anything like that, where you're going to get a couple guys here and there. And some of that you just say they face some truly remarkable arms. But that LA trip, it kind of carried over a little bit afterwards too. Oregon State, they really lit up Oregon State, but it was just a very sporadic offense in Big Ten play. At least in that month of March, they were averaging just over 3 runs a game for an offense that I think you just knew you expected to have more. And I bring up Max Butenbach with the illness that he had. He took a little longer to get going after a monster summer in the Northwoods League and what he had also in the fall. So then he's not getting as many at bats because, if you're Will Bolton, you're desperately trying to utilize that depth and find guys that are going to provide some punch into the lineup because you just couldn't afford to, give up any more at bats. And then Max Butenbach comes back in and all of a sudden he starts playing like the guy that they thought that they would have. And then he gets an illness. And so I think the expectations in the preseason were based on what the rotation would look like and really what that offense could give you. And I don't think anybody thought that this was going to be a devastatingly, Oregon-like offense. But I think you felt like this is a team that could hover close to 300, could be maybe collectively a 290 team, could have a couple of guys in that lineup that would be, 13 or more home run type of guys, 75-plus RBI guys.
Did Gabe Swanson figure something out at the end of last year to have for the entirety of this year? Like
right. Yeah. And that was a big part of it. Absolutely. I think there were 3 guys that I would have looked at and said, okay, these could be your 10 home run plus guys. Gabe, definitely one of them. Dylan Carey, I think, would have been one of those guys too. And then I also think Joshua Overbeek. I think those are 3 guys that you look at and say, these guys have 10 plus home runs, 65 plus RBI type guys, slugging over 500, easily over 500, maybe even close to 600 type guys. Those are going to be your dudes. And then you're going to fill in around them. Caden Brumbaugh was a consistent hitter. There wasn't as much major power with Caden Brumbaugh, but he was getting on base and he was able to drive the baseball a lot. You look at guys like Rhett Stokes and Riley Silva that really had their moments a year ago. Rhett Stokes, especially in the postseason last year, that you thought, okay, between those two, what are you going to get offensively? But you should be able to get a lot, from a year ago with that experience. I look at, again, what Nebraska was getting with Case Sanderson, and I knew they were really excited about him. And he's another guy that I continue to look forward to seeing what he was doing because he sprays it to all fields. And like just the way the ball comes off of his bat when he's got it locked in is pretty fun to watch. And then you started seeing some newcomers too, which I don't think we were necessarily, again, not putting those into the preseason projections of, they got Robbie Bolin, so that's going to be a huge big. They got freshman Devin Nunez. That's going to be a big lift for them too. I just think that the success they had with a really good chunk of that production coming back and a good chunk of those arms, obviously you lose a Brett Sears, that's a big deal too. But knowing that you had Mason McConaughey ready to take that step forward, and a lot of exciting arms behind them, I understand why the expectations were high. And Coach Bolt didn't shy away from that in the preseason either. I mean, he really wanted to see this team in a position to where they could put together the type of resume that they could be in the conversation of hosting a regional.
There is this side of it that, because you're at the end of the year and everything is over, and especially the way Sunday went against Oklahoma, and a lot of the conversation turned to, well, the conference championship, all it's doing is covering up for how bad of a season it actually was. And I don't think either of us are going to say it was a great season from a wins perspective, from a lot of individual success perspective. But I will say this. A year ago, I got hammered on social media as the championship game for the Big Ten against Penn State was getting late, and people started talking, do you bring Brett Sears in? Do you bring him in for an inning to get the save? And at the time, I was saying no, because I want him as healthy as possible, max rest going into a regional, because I want to advance out of a regional. And I got hammered for it before the decision was for him to come in. And the reason being, from a lot of people, anytime you get a chance to put a trophy in the case to win your league, you take it. And I was like, that's fine. I absolutely get that. To me, I was like, there's higher goals for this team, because at that point they were going to get an at-large bid into the NCAA tournament. They weren't playing for their life in the same way they were this year. It works out for Nebraska. They win the Big Ten tournament a year ago over Penn State. Now this year, why isn't this the same case? They got a chance to put a trophy in the case. I know that the rest of the season wasn't great, and obviously didn't get out of a regional again here. But to me, it's the same thing. If you get a chance to put a trophy in the case, that is a notch for success for your program. I ended up, and I'll say it, I took the business on social media, and I was wrong. They put a trophy in the case, and it felt good, and it was good for this team, and it was good for this program a year ago. It's just as good for this team and this program this year to get that Big Ten championship, put a trophy in the case, the third in 5 years. Nebraska baseball has 4 Big Ten championships, has 4 Big Ten trophies in 14 years. And yes, there wasn't the 2020 season, and there was only 1 trophy in the 2021 season. So there have been,
go back 2017, the first Big Ten regular season title.
Yeah, so for Nebraska there, so you've got 4 in less than a decade. If you go the overall since Nebraska joined the Big Ten, there have been 27 championships. Okay, just a second. I'm going to do this really quick. So 26, and then one of them only had 1. So there have been 25 Big Ten championships handed out, regular season and tournament, since Nebraska joined the Big Ten. They have 4 of them.
Yep.
And 3 of them have come in the last 5 years.
Right.
No, the regional success hasn't been there. But guess what? The regional success hasn't been there for 20 years either. I don't think that's a Will Bolt thing. And now I'm speaking specifically to people who throughout the season were on the fire Will Bolt train. And I'm not going to ask you to comment on that because of what you do with the Huskers radio network, but I'll say it because I'm not with the network. I think it's asinine to try to have that conversation in the middle of a season coming off of a Big Ten championship, and then that same season ends with a Big Ten championship. It hasn't gone the way Nebraska fans have wanted, and I guarantee you it has not gone the way Will Bolt and company want it to go. But there are 3 trophies in that case that weren't there 5 years ago. And to me, that says a lot about this program and what Will Bolt is doing.
I have no problem saying this about the conversations around the coaching staff and if there should be changes. My answer to that is it's coming from a lot of people that don't know the program and the inner workings of the program. And maybe that's where I have a bit of an advantage. And I understand that's where maybe my perception could be a little bit skewed too. But I think what they did this year was even more remarkable than a year ago because of the ability to have a group that really took it on the chin during the first wave of conference play, where it would be very easy to accept that as your fate if you have a weak culture. And this is where I know sometimes we overuse the culture and we overdo the culture conversation in all sports many, many times. But I think when you see examples of a strong one, I think it's important to bring that up. And who creates that culture? Well, it starts with the head coach and then the coaches that he has around him. You think of a guy like Rob Childress. I mean, that is a no BS type of guy, but a guy that 100% connects with his players. Will Bolt's the same way. 100% connects with his players, knows the time to hit the right buttons, and also knows the times to let his upperclassmen maybe lead the way and say less. All of those assistant coaches, that entire staff, I mean, that's a connected group. That to me really showed in, I think, one of the more trying moments of this season, that you get back from LA, then you're home for a day, then you're heading right back on a bus in a weird game against Kansas State, and doesn't go well for Nebraska in that situation. You're thinking, oh my God, we got Oregon State coming to the ballpark this weekend too. Wow, this is going to be fun. I could see a lot of doubt. Would have been very easy to creep into a lot of student athletes' minds when you're going through what Nebraska did, and then you're looking at that upcoming opponent, regardless if it's at home or not. And Nebraska showed something there. And then it was just more of trying to have the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as opposed to the 1 step forward, 2 steps back type of situation. And once that schedule lightened up for Nebraska, again, it's one thing on paper for that to happen. It's another thing to actually, okay, got to win these games. Let's go out and do it. Guys know they can. Oh, gosh, we lost the Friday game. Uh-oh. Now we're 9 innings away from losing another series against a team that we should beat. They didn't accept that. Mm-hmm. That Northwestern, I know this one is very small on the radar, but without that series, who knows what happens when they lose in just gut-wrenching fashion on that Friday night game against Northwestern. They tie it up, and then Northwestern has a little punch and Judy hit out to right field to retake the lead. Nebraska doesn't score. And so not only do you have to show up to the ballpark on Saturday to try to even things up, you got to win 2 games to win the series, because there's no game on Sunday because of the weather. It was a doubleheader. They showed up, and what they do, they won those 2 games. That series against Minnesota that I thought was highly stressful the entire way, that Nebraska was able to, again, withstand a shot on Friday, come right back on Saturday and Sunday and win. So it wasn't just the fact that Nebraska took advantage of the schedule when it lightened up, but the way that they had to win those series in a variety of ways still, I think, to me, amplified that players, coaches were still on the same page, that everybody understood the situation that they still had in front of them. And then you get to a situation into the Big Ten tournament, you play your way in. And to your point, you're absolutely right. There's a little bit more extra emphasis and sense of urgency on those games, knowing that this is your only ticket to the NCAA tournament. Yeah, you got a little bit of luck, a lot of luck with a drop fly ball. But again, just like when the schedule lightens up, can you take advantage of it? That game Nebraska didn't win that game when the ball was dropped. Okay, they were still alive in the game, but they didn't win right there. They still had to go out and take advantage of that situation. Then they had to come right back through a weather situation, come right back and play 2 games on that Saturday, one of which against a team that was fantastic, didn't play very well in their regional, but a team that their power numbers were unbelievable, and they were throwing their guy that had been almost unhittable in a lot of occasions and had a few complete games and everything. Nebraska got him out in the 4th inning. And then on the Sunday game, a team that Nebraska had fallen 3 times to against a pitcher that was on a heater, he doesn't even get out of the 2nd inning. So it wasn't like Nebraska all of a sudden had this, well, this team got bounced, this team got bounced. So their path was really easy. They ended up playing some weaker teams. And so they did, they had to go through the 2 best teams in the Big Ten to win that title. And they did that. So to do that at the end of the year, to be able to take inventory of all the crap that happened both on the field and the injuries and some of the illnesses and stuff off the field, and of course the emotional drag that you have in always being reminded of Greg Sharp and that just that way we started the season with that emotion. For this team to be able to, and I say team, it's the coaching staff and the players, to take inventory, to just refuse to accept that fate for this season that had such promise going into it, to me, that is strong leadership. To me, that is strong upperclassmen. To me, that's a strong culture. And if you got a strong culture, you've got a chance to do some pretty special things. And I think that was more evident in the last month and a half of this season than really even the last 4 months of last year, which was a very special season. Mm-hmm. And I just, so when I hear that about coaching changes and whatnot, that's why I just say you got to look at the full picture. You got to look at all of the inner workings, what they were going up against. And sure, is it that much different than other teams? Maybe not. But the fact that they still got themselves in a position to win a tournament title and get an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament, what are we talking about here then?
Let me ask you this. So Will Bolt has coached 5 seasons now. 2020, they only got 15 games in. But this team has won a third of the Big Ten titles that have been handed out over that time. They've made 3 regionals. I thought they had a decent enough case in 2023, and that ends up being one that they missed. So 1-3 on the line on a fourth, and then just the one losing season in 2022. Like, for this program going forward, like, how far away or how close are they to not even hosting a regional? Because you look at the super regionals and there are 7 unseeded teams that advanced into the super regional round. There will be an unseeded team in Omaha because of the way the bracket laid out, and you've got Murray State taking on Duke, both of those unseeded teams, and you've got Louisville and Miami. Those are power conference teams. Arizona, but you've also got a UTSA who advanced in there. The top 2 national seeds went down this past weekend. So when you're looking at Nebraska and you look at, hey, it's working for these teams. Why is it working for these teams and the leagues that they play in and the resources Nebraska has compared to the resources they have, the resources Big Ten programs in general have, even if baseball is lower on the spending priority than some of the other sports compared to what the ACC does or the SEC does or even the Big 12. Like, what's that thing that's missing for Nebraska? Is it having a deeper bullpen? Is it having more guys that can hit 95 on the radar gun? Is it having you look at some, like we saw last year when Nebraska was playing Florida, it seemed like every guy was cookie cutter. They were all 6'6", 240. It's just up and down the lineup. What is that thing, if there is one, that's missing for Nebraska from that step that hasn't happened in 20 years?
I think it's, to me, because I come from a thought of strong and deep pitching is going to take you very, very far. Rotational elite arms for sure. And I think Ty Horn is there. I think what you got between Jackson Brockett and Will Walsh was guys that utilized their stuff really good, but didn't have explosive fastballs. And look, it's not all about the velocity. You can have guys that throw 96, 97 miles an hour, but if they have no movement and they're relying heavily on that, they become predictable. They haven't developed that complementary breaking ball or change up well enough, then you're going to get hit just the same as anybody throwing 86, 87. But I think when you do have those types of players that I'll use the Ty Horn example of a guy that as he continued to find success in the second half of the year, you would watch him maybe in the third and the fourth inning, all of a sudden that breaking ball gained more depth. It became more devastating because then that fastball, even at 93 or 94, would come by and you'd have no shot catching up to it. So guys that have that type of stuff that can bring you a 93, 94 plus fastball, but are also coming right back with an explosive slider or a changeup that's just dropping off the table. You know, those types of guys. Mason McConaughey had all of that. And, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with Mason because of that injury and his draft stock and everything. I mean, there is a decision there. I don't think Nebraska is necessarily counting on him coming back, but you never know. And I know they love him, and I know he loves this program. But having those types of arms, if you're rolling out 3 guys, this is the one thing that I looked at Oklahoma and I was really impressed with. Every guy that they ran out there was 95 plus. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we saw Crossland, the guy that his numbers weren't great. Now, mind you, he's pitching in the SEC, but he was in control of that game. And yeah, sure, it's easy to throw a lot of strikes and challenge hitters when you have the type of cushion that he had, but his stuff was really good. They threw a freshman at the end of that game against North Carolina the previous night, and that kid was throwing 95, 96 miles an hour as well. So I think when you do have some of those power arms, because look, the way we are in college baseball is, and you brought up UTSA, perfect example. You're watching their guy throw 97. You know, those arms are out there, but it's the ones, and this is what I love that Nebraska has, is you got Rob Childress. Give Rob Childress just even some raw ability, a kid with raw ability. In 2 years, Rob will have that guy refined and have that guy effective. So I think it starts there. I think you want to see more of those Mason McConaughey types. I'm not trying to make it sound like they're easy to find, but they're out there. And if they're developed by Rob Childress, I'll put my money on that all day. I think it does start there, because for the guys that are maybe on the cusp of being into that rotation, okay, well, then they become high leverage bullpen guys. Drew Christo is a great example. There's a guy that was a high leverage bullpen arm in a starter's body. And you knew if you had to have an emergency start that 2-5 could pick the ball up and he could probably have a pretty solid outcome. So that's why I think when you can get those elite arms, they're developed under one of the best pitching coaches in college baseball, whether they factor into your Friday through Sunday or you have a spillover into the bullpen and you build that and you stockpile that, to me, you become a very tough team to beat, even if because the reason I say that is so important is you're going to see a lot more slumping collectively in the batter's box than you're going to see on the mound. There might be a couple of guys on the mound that all of a sudden are having a tough time finding the strike zone, but that doesn't typically last as long or is got that long-term effect, or that, I guess, that trickle-down effect as much as it can in the batter's box when you have a collective slump like Nebraska did. I'm not trying to say Nebraska's fine offensively and, oh yeah, you're good there. You want to see some dudes that are going to be able to give you the 10 plus home runs, the 50 plus, 60 plus RBI type guys, the guys that are slugging over 550 or 600. You want those guys because that lengthens your lineup. And I think Nebraska started to show a little bit of that there towards the end, where 1 through 9, they were tough, but now you want some of those guys, maybe 2 through 5, that are just punishing the ball, like the Bryce Matthews and Max Anderson type guys that you have. Again, I know
over 100 home runs in a season team,
right? I'm making it sound like, oh, you just need those guys and you're fine. Like they're living next door to you or something right now. But again, I just think I still put that heavy emphasis back on having those electric arms under the tutelage of Rob Childress. I think puts this program from what is a competitive, always on everyone's radar type of team to a team that you want nothing to do with. A team like, I'll give Iowa credit from this standpoint too. They have been able to find a bona fide Friday, Saturday guy almost every year Rick Heller's been there. They've had guys that have come into that program that are just devastating on the mound. And when you can get that type of tone setter and then followed up with another guy that is extremely tough to get off the mound there, 4 or 5 runs, you're just not putting that much pressure on your offense, especially in a moment that maybe they're struggling a little bit, because you can count on those guys on the mound. I think Nebraska's close to there. Let's just see more of those guys.
And it's not that Nebraska hasn't had those guys. Obviously, Mason McConaughey is what you were expecting coming into this year. But you had Brett Sears. You had the Big Ten Pitcher of the Year a year ago. You can go back under Will Bolt. You had Cade Povich. You had Spencer Schwellenbach, and obviously he was a
and look what those seasons led to.
Yes,
in 21, Nebraska was in the regional conversation until Rutgers came into town, but they were a big part of the regional host conversation. Last year, if Nebraska wins a couple more midweeks, they're in the regional host conversation. So you see the connection there. You mentioned 2 bona fide aces, and then this year, Mason McConaughey, we don't get to see him go past Sam Houston, 3rd week of the season. Again, not trying to say Nebraska all of a sudden in the regional host, but there's that connection of when you've got big-time arms, big-time guys, what it does to the rest of your staff and what it can do in series that, unfortunately, Nebraska wasn't winning in March.
And that's where I'm at when you look at this team and this program on the what's missing. To me, it's the second guy. So coming into this year, you were expecting to have Mason McConaughey, but who was Mason McConaughey light? Who is that 1A, 1B instead of here's your number 1 and then here's your number 2? Like that's the part that Nebraska, if they can ever get that, like last year, if you have Brett Sears and then you have an immediate second ace, not somebody who, I know Brockett threw a no-hitter. I know that. And you saw what guys were able to do with amazing performances in the Big Ten tournament and a lot of one-off or kind of hit and miss on success. But that one guy that's just, they're expected to be a dude every single night out. A little bit of what you saw in the last 2 appearances from Ty Horn.
Yeah.
Like, how can you get that type of consistency with that elite second arm? To me, that's the part that's been missing, and that Nebraska has had that ace. And in those seasons, Nebraska has been in a really good position where that ace has been healthy for the bulk of the season. We didn't get that with Mason this year. But where's that second guy? How do you get that second guy in there? Because you talked about Oklahoma. Like, they have that second guy.
Right.
There's a reason they can throw, and yeah, their ace got roughed up against North Carolina, but like there's a reason you can go into a regional and say you don't have to throw your number one guy because your number two guy is pretty freaking good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like what you were just saying there with what Nebraska had a year ago with Sears then to McConaughey, those are the situations you like to have it. And I think, and I do wonder if the Ty Horn development happens even quicker if you do have a healthy Mason McConaughey, where it's not the last month of the season to where you saw Ty going 5 innings plus, but where you're maybe seeing that more in March because of having a bona fide starter, ace, Friday night guy, electric stuff, setting the tone where you don't feel the weight of the world when you're toeing the rubber on that Saturday. And I got to give credit to Will Walsh because when there were the inconsistencies of a Ty Horn and Jackson Brockett during that month of March, Will Walsh was providing some really good outings, just wasn't getting the run support from that standpoint. I just do wonder if you're going into that Saturday knowing you're already 1-0 in the series, that you feel like Mason McConaughey gives you the chance to be, how does that impact a guy like Ty Horn, who is still on the development process? And you saw it finally take place. And I think he is one of those arms. I think he is one of those guys that he's got electric stuff and can be devastating, especially with another year of development and being able to take that confidence that he ended the season with. But, you do wonder, all of a sudden you've got different guys that are impacted where you don't have to, again, it's a trickle down effect from the standpoint that it changes how you want to do things out of the bullpen as well. It changes how you want to approach your midweeks. When you do have all of your staff locked and loaded and nobody is down with injury. And unfortunately, again, that was the hand that Nebraska was dealt. And I'm not trying to say that all of a sudden you're looking at a team that's more of a 40-win team, 40-plus win team, but I think it does give you a series or two. And I think it also gives you an opportunity in some of those series that you won to sweep those series too. And so it's a lot of what could have been.
Yeah.
But it goes back to your original question of where this team needs to find that growth to be the type of team that Will Bolt wants to see this program be year in and year out. And I think it does start on the mound right there. I think you have to have those types of arms. You've got the guy in place to develop them. It's just a matter of finding those guys and getting them here. And then I think what Nebraska has already done and during the season and kind of in the offseason with those future recruiting classes, there's some exciting boys that are going to be handling the aluminum here in the next couple of years. Again, that's all got to come to fruition. That potential has got to be realized and it's got to play out that way. But I do think that Nebraska understands now this sort of new look Big Ten. And this was maybe the blessing that came with that California road trip. You're out there, you're seeing what UCLA is about. We didn't see Oregon up until the Big Ten tournament, but you're seeing what they're about. You're seeing that those are offensively challenging teams, not challenged, but challenging teams. And that sophomore class that UCLA has, that was the number one ranked incoming freshman class from Perfect Game 2 years ago. And they're all playing like that. So they got developed. Like every major contributor of UCLA, that they're all sophomores. I mean, they haven't been playing college baseball for that long, but there was a lot of talent there, but they got developed and they were able to come together. You look at what the Oregon team, the Washington team, the USC team, they don't have to leave the state or at least that section of the country. But you see what Big Ten baseball, if you want to be there at the top, is going to demand you to do. And I don't think it changes so much of what Nebraska knew they had to do before, because when you want to host regionals, you got to be able to do those things anyway. But I think now you have that in-conference example and that in-conference rivalry, if you will, where you've got these teams that you're going to face most years, whether you go out there or they come here. And that style, it's not your traditional West Coast style. We're just going to small ball you to death and everything. No, they're going to slug you. And then they're going to bring in guys that are throwing 95 plus. And the beauty of that is, well, you can start broadening your recruiting base a little bit too, because not all those guys in California are going to find themselves at USC and UCLA and other schools around there. There are going to be teams that want to still play maybe in the Big Ten Conference and be able to have a chance to go out to the West Coast, play in front of family too. So again, there's advantages there, but I think I like that Nebraska had a chance to see what those programs were about on their home turf and be able to, I want to say, dramatically change what they're doing in Lincoln, but give you an idea of, okay, this is if we want to be at the top and we were in the tournament and we beat two of those teams, how do we be at the top in the regular season? And what do we construct to do that going forward?
I know that we're in a time of transition on where a lot of money is going and what priorities are, but I'm hoping that the addition, and this was my hope a year ago as well, that with the addition of those West Coast teams, it spurs some development across the Big Ten. It makes some programs say, we want to take that next step in the same way that, let's face it, a lot of us were hoping Nebraska was going to do to the league 15 years ago, that you were going to say, no, here's the big dog swinging the big stick. And realistically, that took some time because Nebraska was still figuring stuff out, post those College World Series runs. And now for this team and this program, it's okay, what is that next step? This season is done. There's about a dozen seniors, a lot of familiar names on the way out there. In particular, like you look at the pitching staff that we were just talking about, Christo and Brockett and Dace and Walsh. And then you've got a lot of those hitters that you talked about, what Hogan Haligso was able to end on, kind of like he played well over the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
But Overbeek, Stone, Stokes, Silva, Gabe Swanson. So there's going to be a changing of the guard for particular portions of this team. But next step is obviously season is done. So coaching staff's going to talk with a lot of guys. We are in the transfer portal era. We'll have to watch that. But the more exciting part, and this is exciting whether guys decide to go or not, coming up in 10 days on the 13th of June, the Major League Baseball draft begins. Are there any expectations for any of these guys or incoming recruits that they might hear their name called by a team in one of the millions of rounds that the Major League Baseball draft does?
I think that was the hope for Mason, obviously, first and foremost, and it still might be. But again, when you're coming off Tommy John that took place in the first part of March, obviously there's still a lot of recovery going on. Mason's been a big part of this team, just being around them. And I love that he was able to travel with the team and they were able to get that waiver. But, that was your high draft pick right there. And so that one's going to be interesting. Other than that, no, I don't really anticipate anything else. There might be a couple incoming freshmen that could be back end type guys. But yeah, I don't really see much of that, at least top rounds type flurry for Nebraska this year. I do want to say this for some of the guys you mentioned. Let's not forget the junior college rule.
I was just going to say, I want to make sure we mention it because some of those guys,
there's decisions that have to be made. And guys like Stokes, Overbeek, Silva, those are all decisions that need to be made.
Yes, because of the fact that they played community college ball, JUCO ball. Yep. If they played even a single season, and this is where the waiver is, so just a very quick explainer, it's got nothing to do with future years. So someone could have played JUCO ball, but they're just a junior this year. This doesn't impact them currently, unless the NCAA decides to do a waiver there. Specifically for student athletes ending their career during the 2024-2025 season across the board, all sports, volleyball, cross country, track, wrestling, baseball. Those guys, if they are running out of exhausting their eligibility this year, but they played any JUCO ball, any part of community college athletics, they get a 1-year waiver. So there are some of those guys, like you said, that need to make some of these decisions going into next year. I expect those to be a big part of the conversations with Will Bolt on where some of those guys are, if they're expected to come out, be a major contributor, or is there someone at that same position that Bolt and company are expecting to take that next step and they want to get them in there, even though they're a couple years younger?
Sure. Yeah. And I think those are going to be honest conversations. I mean, even Casey Dice was a junior college guy as well. And we saw him really emerge there towards the end of the season. That's an arm that they wouldn't mind having coming back either as well. So there are
all the arms back. Like I don't even have a conversation, Bolt. Just if there's an arm and they've got a heartbeat connected to that arm, bring them back. I just want all the guys in the bullpen, and then you figure it out from there.
Right. And Casey was a big part of it for sure. Yeah, I think those are going to be two-way conversations for sure. I think those are going to be this is where we would have you currently forecasted given the incoming freshmen, giving maybe where our focus is on the transfer portal and our offseason recruiting, also looking at other junior college guys to try to really finish up the look of the 26 roster. But I also think it's going to be received from these the coaching staff it will receive what the player input is, and that is, hey, just because you have another year of eligibility, do you still want to play college baseball? Are you ready to start your life? Are you ready to get out there in the real world? Some of these guys might want to try their hand in some type of pro or semi-pro baseball. I mean, that's the other thing. I think we always assume when you have eligibility left and those players decide to move on, well, what the heck? Did the coach send him packing, or did he not like the team? No, as you know, Kaleb, even as good as it is to be a college student athlete and the perks that you get, especially nowadays, at some point you're ready to start your life. At some point you feel like maybe I've been in college too long and it's time to see what else is out there, especially if I know maybe there isn't a Major League Baseball career path for me. It's time for me to start figuring things out too. So I think those are two-way conversations. I think those are going to be taking place as early as tomorrow. And I think we're going to see what maybe some of those decisions, especially with those guys that could come back another year with that junior college eligibility, will be. Now, the other thing is the portal giveth, the portal taketh away.
Right.
That's the other thing that I'm very curious. I've been asked that a lot of, like, who do you think is going to stay? Who do you think is going to stay? I don't know. I just, to try to get inside of the head of these players this day and age, where I'm seeing them at their best. I'm seeing them when they've got the uniform on. Everybody is cheering them. They've got a big smile on their face. I don't know the conversations they're having back at home. I don't know the conversations that they're having with their girlfriend. I don't know the conversations that they're having with if they have an advisor. I don't know what those conversations are. And it's hard to really detect where someone who seems like they're really dialed in and, oh gosh, they're going to be a major contributor next year or years to come, all of a sudden you find out that they're leaving. You're thinking, what the heck happened? You just never know. Or it can work the other way. We're like, oh yeah, this guy's got I'm leaving written all over him. And all of a sudden he's like, no, I'm all about the Big Red. So you just never know. These next days, I think, especially this next week, is going to be really interesting from that standpoint, because obviously this coaching staff needs to know who they're looking at for a 2026 roster, of if there are any major departures, guys that, we're really factoring into some big roles. Do they have to find replacements for them right away? Does that up the timetable for some of the incoming freshmen? Because as we know, this coaching staff will play incoming freshmen. They will play guys, whether they're on the mound or position players. And we saw examples of that. So you got to understand what you're working with here. So that's why I go back to this being a two-way conversation. The communication amongst the coaches and these players will take place, and they'll get down to the bottom of it. So that's why I think you're gonna hear a lot of, before these guys go to their various summer baseball locations, or some I know are going to be sticking around in Lincoln. I think before they head out to summer baseball, I think they want to make it known, because look, you're in the summer. So if your intention is to go anywhere else, you got to make that decision too. And you got to start the enrollment process.
I think that's a big part there on the summer ball, following where these guys get those invites to go play. Are they going to the Northwoods? Are they going to the Cape? Where are these guys going? Because there are different levels. When you see those invites of who's going where, you're seeing the way a lot of the outside sources view those players.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to follow that, and we'll continue to follow all of that at huskerbacks.com, all of that news there. And Nick, let me close by saying this. I've enjoyed the hell out of listening to you back on the baseball broadcast full time this year. Obviously, listening to Ben and David there as well. You guys are a joy to listen to, even if it's on a Friday night and you guys are filling for 2 hours and there's not even going to be a game played. You guys are great to listen to. Tremendous representatives for the Huskers radio network, Husker Nation in general. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way, because I see what social media looks like when folks pour out the love to you guys and all the things you guys do to be that neighbor, be that friend over the air that we get to go through the highs and the lows of a season with. That's the beauty of radio. That's the beauty of broadcasting and what you guys do. And you guys are top-notch professionals at it. And I love every second of getting to hear you guys even if we're doing thank yous halfway through a game on Sunday because we can see the way things are going, you guys are there. You guys are wearing it, your hearts on the sleeve, just like the rest of us listening. And just thank you guys very much for everything you guys do to bring us closer to the action, but also feel like we've got a friend at the ballpark.
I appreciate you saying that. If in the friend of the ballpark, I love that, because I know when I was listening to baseball broadcasts and when Greg and Lane and Jeff Colhane were doing games, I'd be mowing the lawn and all of a sudden I'd have the lawn done. I didn't even realize it was done because I was just caught up into the game and the way that they told that story, described the action. And obviously, Ben and I have developed such a strong friendship, which I'm so fortunate to have. David Gustafson as well. And so, the thing about this year, we knew it was going to be tough, and we knew at any moment we could get that horrible news that unfortunately we got right after the season opener. And I think that was our mission, was to make him proud more than anything, because the amount of games that I listened to with Greg, whether I would be with him or I'd be mowing or I'd be doing something while listening to a game and be fully engaged because of the way that they took you away from what you were doing and got you wrapped up into that game, and just the description of everything going on in between pitches. We just wanted to make him proud and more importantly, Husker Nation proud, because that's what this fan base deserves. They show up for everything. They support this baseball program and every other athletic event to their fullest. So it's the very least that we can do is try to return that favor by giving them the best picture that we can paint on what we're seeing. And we're not always perfect. I know myself, I can say that many times as well, but bottom line is, like you said, we care so much about this program and in the product that is being delivered on the radio. So so many great people behind the scenes too. Josh Hilkeman, Russ Brown, those guys are just fantastic to work with. All of our producers, guys like Hamden Cohn, Duke Rude, David Swotek. I know I'm missing a couple as well. But Henry and every one of those guys that you mentioned, the rain delays. Hey, they're the true heroes during those rain delays, because we're calling for this or that or this, and they're putting it right in there. So I can't imagine working with a better team when it comes to a production standpoint as well. I think we've got the best in college baseball. So I am blessed and so thankful to be back. But I really appreciate you saying that, Caleb.
I'll tell you what, on one of those rain delays, I think it was that Friday night game, I almost teared up getting to hear Greg Sharp over the air.
Yeah.
Getting to hear one of those pull up there. So phenomenal there. And now, and I know there'll still be news that needs to come out of the Huskers radio network for football play-by-play. And because of the passing of Greg Sharp, somebody does have to step into the giant shoes that he filled across the network. Someone's going to have to do that. So we know there's still a lot of news to come for the Huskers radio network. We are 86 days away from the Husker football season and a game at Arrowhead Stadium. So a lot to happen between now and then. Big Ten Media Days. Obviously, we'll be following along with Super Regionals this weekend, College World Series, because it's right here in our backyard. How many times can we make it over to that ballpark and say, I like the Chuck, but man, it's not Rosenblatt. Just all of those conversations that we get to have the next couple of weeks. But the attention is fully turning to the summer and the fall, and the debut of the Danny Busboom Kelly era with the AVCA First Serve Showcase at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Husker football in Kansas City. What are things going? And track and field has still got to finish out their season with nationals. And what does that end up looking like for the Directors Cup standings? Because Nebraska has been hovering around the top 25 and the top 10. What are they going to finish at? So a lot still to come for Husker athletics, but I think we didn't just put a bow on this thing. We put it in a bag and we fired it out of a cannon. So if there's anything you want to know about Husker baseball, listen back anytime to hear on the Husker Max YouTube page. Make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on your favorite podcast provider in audio form, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those things. So Nick, thanks for hanging out this afternoon. We'll talk more than baseball going forward from here.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. To have a blast, man.
And for the rest of you, go Big Red. Until next time.